We're going to have Sachin Jain from Pepsi. We have Shawna Kovacs from Google, Claudia Diaz Singer from Smucker Company, Dr. Theresa Velk from Kraft Heinz, and Joyce Petrella from Calculus to Talent. We got a full lineup, a great lineup, and we're also fortunate to have Ed Miller from Class moderating the panel, and they're going to be talking about instilling a values-based culture. We got a little bit of background noise here. Apologies. I'm going to go ahead and introduce Ed, so we can avoid the all the time it's going to take to go through the individual bios. We'll let the panelists go ahead and do that. So Ed Miller is the SVP of Strategy and Development at Class. And he previously served as the CEO at NovoEd, as the president at Blackboard, CEO of Zythos Software. Hopefully I pronounced it right. And he's held other senior executive roles throughout the software industry. And as you'll clearly see, Ed's passionate about learning leadership and building diverse cultures within the organization. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Ed so he can take it away and get us going right into the content. Ed, floor is all yours.
Looks like we're having some technical difficulties with Ed's mic.
Yeah, Ed, do you have the platform open too?
I think we could pitch it and just get started. I think we, as a panelist, know what we want to share with the great people today. We want to just kick it off with while Ed's having his technical difficulties.
Let's do it.
Yeah, we'll try and get that resolved. I appreciate that, Theresa. Go ahead and I guess everybody just kind of introduce each other while we're trying to get that Ed's mic issue resolved. Appreciate that.
Sure. So it's so nice to be here. Thank you for the invitation. My name is Theresa Velk, and I am the head of learning and development for the U.S. zone at Kraft Heinz.
I'll go next. I'm Shawna Kovacs. I'm head of talent and OD for Fitbit at Google. I was at Fitbit, and Google just recently acquired Fitbit. So
I'm Claudia Diaz Singer, and I have a responsibility for talent at Smucker. Nice to be here as well.
Hi, I'm Sachin, work for PepsiCo, part of the global talent management team. I look after culture and employee engagement for PepsiCo globally.
Great, and I think I'm last. My name is Joyce Petrella. I lead the company Calculus of Talent. We are a small boutique talent development firm and working in both talent management as well as learning and development spaces. I was a practitioner just like you, so I'm going to be sharing today a little bit of kind of my past experience as a practitioner, but also with many of my clients as I've been in business now for about 6 years. So thank you for having us.
I'll go first. I know it's first up on the docket to talk about our values-driven culture, Kraft Heinz. One of the best decisions I know I've made personally in my career was coming to Kraft Heinz last year. So when I joined, the company was going through a massive transformation, and one of those pieces of that transformation was launching new values, which you guys see behind me here. I'll move around if you guys want to see what they are. But the year before I began, so in 2019, the company went and did listening sessions across the globe from the employee level all the way up through the senior leadership level. And now we've invited all 40,000 of our employees to participate in a very immersive learning experience, which we have deemed the heart of Kraft Heinz, living our values. And during the sessions, they actually are becoming values-driven leaders, they're culture carriers. And the way that we're doing that is putting them through very practice-driven learning sessions where they get to meet with people across the globe and understand really what are these values and how do they start having impact-driven decisions being made immediately after they come out of the sessions. I know Claudia wanted to build off of and share some of the things they're doing as well.
Yeah, no, as we were talking about the values-based culture, I would say at the Smucker company, as Theresa does, we have our basic beliefs that are not just words, but really the foundation of every decision we make, whether it's strategically or daily. It's also what we all know and understand through our behaviors and how we work with one another. You know, the company has been around since 1897, and we've followed sound principles. And although so much has changed in the world, things have evolved as well. And so those are just some of the things that we're trying to also stay in tune with. But I would say one of the things that these values, at least for me, in working with not only just in the work we do, but with one another, is that when you can create the space for that honest dialogue where we're able to get closer to the needs of the organization and employees, I feel like it really helps us bring to life those L&D strategies, because not only are they just things that we have to do, it's really the experiences that we're able to bring to life. So that's one way with the values-based culture, really, I feel amplifies the work that we do. And most importantly, it's not only just at work, so you can bring the element of the external constituents along with the internal work that we do. So that's one of the things that uniquely represent our basic beliefs of quality, people, ethics, growth, and independence.
Yeah, no, I'll just build on that, what both Theresa and Claudia said. For PepsiCo, it was a similar story, but with slight difference. So as the leadership transition happened in PepsiCo in late 2018, as Indra Nooyi stepped down and we had a new CEO, our leadership team first got together to define what's the next chapter of PepsiCo. And therefore, they defined the business vision, business targets. And from there, we started to decide or started to work on what is the new values that can support that business vision. And therefore, we had three basic elements going into defining our values. First, what is the business vision that we want to achieve? Second, what's the marketplace intelligence telling us? What are other companies looking at based on market condition and agility that is required in these times? And third, really listening to our employees on what do they value most in PepsiCo's culture, as you know, we have been there for a long period of time. And from those three elements, we build in together what are the new values, or we call them the PepsiCo way. What are the new ways or behaviors that we want everyone to live by on a daily basis? In terms of driving it, I would say learning is an extremely critical part of it. But we also said that if we have to really ingrain it to every day of every employee, we have to hack all our core processes. So our processes, whether they were around attraction, whether they were around assessment or development, where learning comes in, or around performance, or even around recognition, we hacked all our HR processes to ensure that PepsiCo way, as we call it, our values, is now integral part of that. And that's why we believe our employees are now in the journey. I would not say we have completed the journey, but over the last 2 years, we have achieved a lot in terms of making sure our employees are living these on a daily basis.
That's great. At Fitbit, it's very similar to what everybody talked about here. Fitbit's mission is to make everyone in the world healthier, and it's been that mission since day one. We only created what we call, not values, but company commitments about 1.5 years ago. And it was quite a process that we went through with a third party that we brought in, and then working with our exec staff, and then kind of rolling it out and feeling it out within the company. And we came up with 3, really just champion the customer, rally together, and embrace the challenge. And there are behaviors that are associated with each of those commitments, and non-behaviors or things we don't want to see. So how we those behaviors are exemplified in each one of those commitments, and then the things that are kind of anti-behavior. So our Fitbit, culture is really grounded in our mission of making everyone in the world healthier. And it's brought to life by those commitments and by those behaviors that we have associated with all those commitments. And they really, that's what drives our performance. So they're weaved into all of our fundamentals that we do here at Fitbit. So performance, goal management, talent management, rewards, learning and development, it's all kind of weaved in throughout in what we do. But it's fairly new for us since we've only been about a year and a half ago.
I'll just pipe in from a practitioner perspective, a former practitioner. Learning played such a big role in helping the values come alive because we live in a VUCA world, right, where everything's volatile and uncertain and complex and ambiguous. What we found was giving the even the senior leadership from the very, very top down to the independent employee to be able to make decisions and know how to use the values as the North Star. We gave them a lot of opportunities to, in a safe environment, learn how to use the values to help make those really fundamental decisions. This happened to be in a healthcare organization. And I will tell you, we measured kind of where are you today before we went into the session, and now how confident are you in being able to apply the values in your daily life and the decisions that you have to make, whether it's on the call to a healthcare provider or to a patient. And it was amazing to see the delta. So it's measurable. A lot of people say, oh, you can't measure values. I would disagree. I think you can. And it has to be designed upfront into the DNA of the programs that you put in place.
So that all begs in a couple more questions, because we've talked about the work to establish those values and roll them out, but how do you keep instantiating them in the employees? How do you get to be part of their mindset? And especially when you're onboarding new employees and we're onboarding employees nowadays that have never really been to the office. They may not have met their peers or met anyone except over Zoom. So how do you build the culture and keep it going amongst the employees once you've really determined it and started to roll it out?
I can cover that one first because I'm very proud of an amazing team. And one of the things underneath our umbrella is onboarding. So I got to take an opportunity to shout out one of my team members, Stacy Trammell, because we've gotten the best feedback that the company's ever got on onboarding in this virtual world. So the first week that she actually delivered onboarding was virtually. And the ways that we really enhanced it is making it a gamified experience. I think we learned in this session earlier today about how you can really, as soon as you start putting practice into it, that's where it takes learning from the 20% to the 50% mark for people. So as soon as we started gamifying it, giving people opportunities to really feel, touch, and understand the material, they started really embedding it and becoming those culture carriers that we want them to be.
I'll go next. When we first started a few years ago at Fitbit doing some very kind of intense onboarding, it was a full day in person. And we shortened it dramatically since then to about a half a day, which was dramatic for us. And then when all of this started, the pandemic started, we shortened it down to an hour doing it online. So we really went from a whole day in person to online. And it's been great because what we did was we kind of took out the IT piece of it. IT is a big part of the onboarding experience, getting your laptops, figuring out how to work on everything. But we also took a look at the content and said, how can we shorten the content and kind of do other things around it? So we've kind of parsed it out a little bit and made it a lot shorter. The one kind of bigger thing that we did was we spent time with managers in the company to say, it's going to be different for people that are joining your team. So how is it different for somebody that's starting like this, as opposed to somebody you can sit down with or take to lunch or have a coffee with or something? So, whether that's setting up regular Zoom meeting, whether that's getting to know them, whether that's showing your face, whether it's get other people to reach out to them, maybe assigning them a buddy, things like that. But a lot of the changes we made, other than reducing the time that we're sitting like this in an onboarding, was to really, sit down with the managers and put content together for the managers to kind of change the way that they work with people coming on board.
Yeah, and I like this fascinating piece of what was just said. I would call it, when the pandemic hit all of us, it really forced all the HR teams to think about digitization. Mm-hmm. And I would say that we digitized our onboarding program by doing almost all the same things that everyone else said. But I'll call out one thing that we did beyond maybe what has been done. As we started digitizing, so onboarding, obviously making it shorter, simpler. We do have Degreed as a learning engagement platform, so creating Degreed learning paths which are auto sent to employees who join on day one, ensuring that the manager knows the changed scenario and then their capabilities built. But beyond that, we did one unique thing whereby we created a new hire integration, almost a 360 tool, whereby every new hire, once he or she comes in, 90 days after he or she comes in, automatically gets sent out a 360 where he or she can select set of raters and stakeholders. And typically 360s are used for development in any organization. Here, the objective of this particular 360 is just to help them integrate in the company. So what we are ensuring with that 360 is, okay, reach out to your stakeholders and understand from them what is their expectation of you and your role. Since we do not meet face to face, since I don't roam around in the office anymore, and there are no informal conversations that are happening, water cooler conversations. So this is another tool to ensure that they are getting the right feedback very early on, and therefore having that dialogue based on that feedback to ensure they get integrated into PepsiCo's culture and the network. So that's something that I'll uniquely call out, but other things that everyone spoke about, I would call it digitization of onboarding in a way, right?
Yeah, I would agree with the comment, Sachin, that you made, because what we have found is literally was Friday the 13th, our office is closed and we had a new hire orientation on Monday. So miraculously, we were able to start our first virtual onboarding that quickly. And what we had thought at the time, because we had been preparing as we had moved to a new HCM system and our onboarding had already had a hybrid approach, we were somewhat already ahead of the game, but what we had to learn then quickly was how to use the technology in an environment where we value so much the face-to-face communication. But what we quickly found is not only were we able to push ahead our plans for virtual onboarding, because that was on our plan for that year to expand, it actually allowed us to nurture more of the relationships cross-functionally across the company faster than maybe we would have in previous onboarding experiences. So it forced us with the technology. But one of the things that I would say we have learned is that although we are sitting in front of these cameras and in a culture where remote employees felt like the outsiders, everyone felt like they were on the same learning field and or platform, and in a sense it became the norm to have your cameras on. So that, I would say, from technology evolution, for years I've been saying, well, we have FaceTime, we have these different things because we would say face-to-face is our preferred method. It is almost evolved and become the exception not to have your camera on. And so from a culture perspective, that has continued to, I see it and expect it, right? But also coaching those that maybe aren't as comfortable. So that continues to be an area of focus.
So it sounds like in some ways the pandemic helped level the playing field, if you will, between remote workers and workers that did get to come to the office, both physically and in their communication styles. I'm going to go a little deeper here, and I don't know, we didn't talk about this, so I don't know if anyone has the answer, but onboarding, and I think about in an hour, you're going to get a lot of information shared. It's going to be condensed, but there's something about the values of the company that have to be lived every day or learned every day. Are there any things that are coming to mind? And if not, maybe it'll be a follow-up conversation we have that really help instantiate those values on a day-to-day basis. I love with the 360 concept, sort of a reverse 360, if you will. But I was wondering if anyone on the panel has some thoughts on that instantiating those values day to day, especially in this distributed environment.
Yeah, no, and like I said, we ensure that employees are living, and this was part of our journey, not really because of pandemic, but we, as we internally call it, we hacked all our HR processes. So just going little, double click into it. For attraction, when we talk to external candidates, even from that point in time, we started speaking about the PepsiCo way or our new values. So that it starts from then. Then assessment and development. All our processes of assessment have now PepsiCo way integrated into it. So the feedback reports that you get from the organization on assessment, it has PepsiCo way or the culture built into it. Similarly, performance management. Every employee is supposed to take an objective around PepsiCo way. And that ensures that every employee and a manager is having a conversation around the values and therefore are doing something about it every day. And last but not the least, which I think is the most important piece, is recognition. Again, on our digitization journey, normally recognition platforms are designed for engagement. We reversed it. We said our recognition platform is designed, or we designed it to drive culture. And we said engagement is a secondary objective or a secondary outcome. So we designed it in a way where employees are getting celebrated, or we call the platform Smiles, a link to our vision of creating more smiles with every bite and every sip. But it's Smiles, and you can give and receive smiles on displaying behaviors which are linked to our culture or our value. Therefore, we drive, today morning only we were having a town hall where, just this year, we have given around 420,000 smiles already within the organization. So that's the most important aspect, where every employee is either giving or receiving smiles or celebrating those values and those behaviors on a day-to-day basis. So those things, I believe, are enabling employees to live it on a day-to-day basis. But I'll add on that on top of it, leader-led communication in these times is extremely important. So we had specific town halls, specific events where leaders came and celebrated the culture or the values of the organization, calling out how different people across the globe have risen up to the challenge of pandemic, lived the values of the organization, and created value for stakeholders. So thereby making sure that every leader-led conversation is about values, that is extremely important to drive it.
I'm just going to add one thing on that. I agree with everything you said. We do something similar in a lot of the things that you talked about. One thing I'll just add on that we did that was kind of fun is we had badges as part of our recognition. So you can attach these badges around championing the customer, rally together, around our commitments. So in that continuous feedback, or getting to that continuous feedback environment, we attached our commitments to badges. So, and we did kind of tally those. Well, how many, champion the customer badges were out there, and how many of these badges were out there? And so it made it kind of fun to just keep it going in the company.
That's great, because so much of what we're hearing is it's not about creating some brand new concept. The concept of recognition or leadership communications are fundamental, but reapplying them to reiterate the values, the 360 reviews, switching it around to tie them back to values, is things that a lot of companies can do with the programs they have in place. Just reapplying them to think about what is the value of those programs and orienting them. Mm-hmm. So how does that change your employee engagement metrics? You talked a little bit about switching from engagement to making these values a priority, but either way, what are the best practice and techniques you've found about employee engagement, and has it changed a lot with this change in our workforce?
Yeah, we constantly measure employee engagement through surveys. We do have annual engagement surveys at PepsiCo. What we saw in 2020 specifically, and because of the pandemic and because of the nature of the pandemic, we did reach out to our employees multiple times through the year. We clearly saw 2-3 big trends. So one, we saw a dip in energy of employees in April, or I would say, whenever the lockdown happened in geographies. So we saw a dip, but we also saw that employees adapted to the new reality very early on. So maybe April was a dip, and thereafter May, the energy came back, and thereafter it's been rising. So we saw that it was a shock, but thereafter it improved. Second trend we saw is that these changes happen very differently in different geographies. Depending on the phase of pandemic in different geographies, or depending on the local culture, there were nuances there. The third thing that we saw in our annual engagement survey is actually our engagement levels went up the roof, went through the roof. So we have had our highest engagement in 2020 over last 1 decade. And we believe that that's just because of the right level of communication and empathy and care that the organization was able to display in these times. But that's what I've even heard from other peer companies. Wherever the programs were right or they worked right, I think engagement has gone up in most companies. But I'd like to hear from other panelists how the engagement in their companies were.
Yeah, I mean, Theresa, Claudia, what have you guys seen respectively?
Yeah, our engagement has actually gone up as well. So we're hitting some of the highest marks we have in history as well. I think it's very similar, the care, empathy, and communication. So our president started doing coffee chats every other week. We introduced learning series sessions. So every month, linked with the values as well, we have an external expert come in that's connected with one of our values to share their best practices. So similar to why everyone's here today, that's why employees go there, right? So they want to hear about our values, but also what people are doing externally. And just the communication has just gone through the roof. So I think that's really linked with helping our engagement.
Yeah, I would add as well, we did pulse survey shortly after the first month or so to understand what the needs of our employees were. Specifically, I think naively, we were just thinking, okay, well, what will it look like when we go back to work? And here we are a year later, still trying to figure that out. I would say it required us just to pause and ensure first and foremost that we were focused on the people and the well-being. So as part of our values, the people is so important. And we also had to adjust in this new way of working in a more traditional work environment where you're in the office, so that we could figure out what the needs and the new normal might look like, changing at a pace that we had not ever seen before. I would also add that 2/3 of our workforce is in operations, and where these individuals were going into work in every single day and did not have that work from home luxury that so many did. And so we had to be very intentional in ensuring what are the needs of those employees as well. So we used our pulsing technology to better understand what that looked like. And that really helped influence our strategies that we used very quickly to ensure that employees were taken care of, focusing on well-being, mental health, and also intentional connections. So peer connections is the biggest thing that everybody was craving, but we expanded with our Yammer platform that we use to create community. And that community allowed us to bring in the events that we used to do in person, but like I said, was only like corporate focused, and then remotely was done individually. But it allowed us to collectively celebrate together those activities, but being mindful too that it probably looks different for those that are in the operations. So striking that balance was something really important with our engagement survey results, but also knowing that communication, partnering with our COEs across the company, that it is not an HR-led function. It's not L&D that's leading it, but it's all of us that have responsibility for preserving our culture and that engagement. So those were just some ways that we knew we would need to continue to do that. And we're currently working on some additional pulsing with some other organizational changes. So just listening, intentionally listening, ongoing through different forums.
It seems, and not surprising, but a greater focus on the employees from leadership, from L&D across the board, spurred on by the pandemic, get all of us around the world to be more focused, actually has shown that that type of focus generates much better engagement, and it comes back to us. And I think a lot in folks in HR and L&D have maybe communicated that for a long time, but this has been an example where there's proof points. Do does everyone believe that this will continue, as we get to whatever the new normal is, that these sort of commitments to being further engaged with our employees will, and those results, are the plans to continue?
Yeah, I'll say from our standpoint, yes, at some level, we're going to start kind of slowly adding in things. We're going to look at modality and what works best, but yes, it will still kind of be similar to what we're doing. I just want to say one thing. We've been talking about how it's been success and we've seen success around that, but the one thing we did struggle with here was people switching off and kind of recharging, because when we moved to all of this during the pandemic, it became screen time constantly, right? So there were some things we did really have to look at from a wellness perspective and say, we need to change this. So we don't want to necessarily keep that pace of doing it the way we've been doing it today, because people need time away from this. People need time to connect. People learn differently, so we'll reevaluate it, but at some level it will continue more so than it probably has in the past.
No, I definitely agree with that, Shawna. And we're finding, I have a Fortune 100 telecommunications client who in 2020 had planned a virtual rollout of a particular program that they had played. What was fascinating to me, what they were able to do was to pivot, to be much more sensitive to the way people were experiencing Black Lives Matter, a lot of other things that were kind of really gut-wrenching when you add the pandemic and all of the the strains of what's going on in their environment. And to be able to do that and be in a sensitive way, knowing that most people were home or working in a remote as well, or a hybrid type of environment. And I think Ed, you're onto something there, which is to say, will this continue? I think it certainly will. We've gotten better at it, but we do have to be careful about how we really think about what we're planning and then be able to pivot quickly. What's nice about the technology is it allows people to really reconnect, but change the content in some ways to let the technology help people connect on a very visceral and very genuine, authentic level. Challenging, but it's doable. And I've just been really impressed by this particular organization in being able to move so quickly when things happen like that. So that's
Did the other leaders find the same thing about education and best practices about overwork? And I think everyone got into one day going into the next and spending hours that were so different. You didn't have that transition from getting in your car and driving to work for those who used to go in. It sort of was a mental beginning of the day, and same thing coming home. Did you do anything expressly at some of your other organizations to address that?
Like you said, and like Shawna was mentioning, we had to call that out, that this is continuous, right? And we, apart from pulsing, we understood from our data analytics team that people are spending more time on screen or longer hours, right? Their days starting early and ending late. But therefore, we encourage people to take break during the day. It was winter months not long ago. Even if they want to take a break and go for a walk, we encourage that, and we ensure that managers are talking about these things to their teams. But I would say, beyond all this, one thing as we go forward that everyone has to keep in mind, and we have to figure out a solution. I don't think we have a solve for it, is human to human connect. How do you ensure that social connect is built back in, whether in learning, whether in day-to-day working? That's one thing that all our surveys, all our pulses are telling us, that employees miss that. And even though we have new tools, even though we have Zoom, we have various other things, but there is no substitute that we have found yet for that water cooler chat. How do you get that? And informal learning, or those conversations, are key part to how you learn, how you sort of get the work done in any organization. Every conversation, earlier, if it was a 5-minute conversation, now it is at least a 30-minute conversation, because I have to set up time and get onto a Zoom and stuff like that. So that's something that we don't know an answer to right now. Different employees or different leaders are evolving their own ways. But I'm sure there would be a technological solution in near future. Some startup would be working on it, I'm sure, to get a better answer to how do you informally connect, and how do you try to fill that gap of social connect, which all of us are missing at this point in time.
Yeah, I would say, especially Joyce, you brought up a very good point. In a time of there's just so much emotional heaviness that so many are carrying, and in a where you already cannot extend a hug or any of those connection points, specifically, we definitely experience that as well. So we are getting more creative, where encouraging that our office is open, but we still are not requiring individuals to come into the office while following very safety protocols and all of that. And so slowly but surely, I think we're inviting individuals, but just as such as naming it, that this is an issue, we want to work through it, and we don't want people working all through the night, all these different hours, but flexibility looks different for people, and honoring that and having that conversation has been very helpful, and I think has opened the dialogue to what the workplace of the future will look like.
I agree with that, Claudia. Just to piggyback on that, and you just triggered a memory that I had. They changed the times for the delivery. Originally, it was because people were struggling with bandwidth, right? Their kids were trying to log into schools, and so everybody was competing for internet time, if you will, or just the bandwidth on their servers. And it ended up having a different effect, which was to say, oh my gosh, I can do this after dinner, or I can participate with other people because the timing is a little bit more flexible. It just has changed a new normal as to how we deliver a lot of our programmatic solutions. It's just interesting.
And I think you're right, Sachin. The ability to replicate people just getting together in an ad hoc basis.
Yeah.
Management by walking around, done right, is a good thing. You can find people where you give a chance to give, a public compliments and let everyone share information just in that 5-minute moment. You can't really do that on Zoom. It's pretty intrusive. If someone just popped up on your screen. So looking to solve for that in our hybrid world is going to be interesting. How do you think managers' behaviors to that end? What have managers been doing? Is it just more scheduled activity? Is there anything else you found? Have you seen a move, for example, from less asynchronous training to more synchronous events in order to bring people together? What have we seen directly related to L&D activity relevant to the culture? Is it more synchronous or more asynchronous?
I do want to share what we've done that's been really successful in kind of building this connection and leader driven is we've created a 3-part series that we call a Me to We workshop about how to build highly effective teams. And we build it upon each other. So we start with the leader assimilation. So whether you're new to the organization, you've never met anybody in person, or you've taken on a new team, we start there with helping understand who are your teammates, what are their strengths. Then we move into doing disc sessions with the group. And then finally, we help them identify what is their BU identity. So they've been really effective in breaking down walls, helping leaders really understand who people are as individuals versus just being task driven. It really opens up that channel for building trust and communication. They've been really successful.
Great. We do have an audience question, which was regarding the gamification we were speaking of earlier. What was the platform and how did you make that happen?
One platform we've brought on that's been really great is called Mentimeter. So menti.com, mentimeter.com. And it helps you build word clouds. You can do quiz questions. It's very interactive. And we use it in L&D. And as we do workshops, our business audience wants to start using it as well. So it's a really great platform and a very inexpensive option as well, if you guys want to check it out.
Are there other tools? I'm sure the audience is wondering as you've moved into it, are there other new tools you've discovered or moved to or transitioned? obviously everyone is using Zoom or WebEx or some, their video communications tools. Is there anything else that you've discovered? Talked about your 360 product. What about you, Shawna? Something new that helped you get things done during the pandemic?
Not really. I think more features around some of the Zoom things or Google or whatever it is you're using. We've done a lot more like team assimilations, and in the team assimilations, we would do like little games like from Kazoo or things like that, which are kind of fun and they kind of break up the monotony. But I find a lot of managers are getting a little bit more, personal with their teams and wanting to, find out more about each other and doing a lot more of that with one another. But no specific tool that we've really taken advantage of.
Great. Any other audience questions? Have we reached out to the audience, and we can maybe talk a little bit about the type of communications that have been done. We talked about much more leadership communications relative to the culture. Is there anything that comes to mind in terms of within your organization? Was it frequency? Was it the type of message? Was it small groups, large groups? If you think about the communications that happened that helped instill the culture, are there any things that stand out and say, wow, that was great, we need to do more of that? Anything come to mind?
We did something internally for managers. We created something called a manager forum. It's, several other probably do this, but it took place on the same day every month at different times based on time zone. And we'd always pick a topic, and the topic would be, what's on a leader's mind or a manager's mind. And I know we did a lot around the culture when we first rolled out the culture, because we kind of had a top-down way of how we rolled things out. But the forums have been very successful, and we've even moved those into Google when we went to Google as well. So it kind of keeps the topic, and it keeps, and I think as it was mentioned earlier, I forgot who mentioned it, maybe Sachin, but that it's kind of rolled into everything that we do. We talk about the commitments in almost everything that we do around training, all hands, line of business, all hands, everything that we do. So we try to fit it in there somewhere, or talk about one of them or all of them, or, every time we have something where we can get a big group of people together.
Yeah,
great.
One unique thing I can say is that we have still not done it, but we are trying to design it as we speak, is a scorecard for every manager on how they and their teams are living the culture of PepsiCo. So we're calling it the PepsiCo Way Integrated Report. So from all data points that we have, whether from our surveys, whether from our tools, recognition tools and performance management and other tools. So we're trying to build a scorecard for each manager, which will, one, empower them, because it will tell them how their teams are doing and how they are doing, and also drive some level of accountability and ownership of the culture at their level, apart from obviously top-down communication that happens in every organization.
Yeah, I was going to add, we've folded in, we've had this framework for some time. It's our culture and action, and it's expectations for different levels, depending on your role and scope of responsibility. But what being in this environment has actually afforded us the ability to do with a very small team is actually offer more learning opportunities and more connections, so that we are using that framework much more as kind of our guiding principle in whatever that learning event might be or conversation point. So for example, if there was an ID&E focus around Black History Month, we used some of our framework concepts and behaviors that we wanted to bring to life through listening or exercises and breakouts in a different way versus just a piece of paper, because we encourage it to be used for feedback, for coaching, for performance, and it allows for just dialogue and consistency and practice of those skills. So there's a lot we've learned, but a lot more that we need to continue to do.
Have you found that there was a bigger or larger interest in L&D from the employees during this period? Were they more interested or less interested in participation? Was it
I like to believe that everybody really is excited to learn, right? But
So,
I was
just curious.
the flexibility has allowed people to participate probably more than what it would have required if you had to travel, right? Or if you didn't have access or could make that time. So what we have found is not scheduling it as a requirement, but just offering at different times and not having to register for it, just come and join us.
Right.
That has allowed, I think, for more excitement and ability and flexibility to join.
I'd say it's gone up as well because we've gotten creative and trying to be innovative with doing podcasts, and we do a lot more video now than we do like straight up email communications to get people excited and wanting to be a part of it. So we've gotten really creative in the modalities in which we're delivering.
Yes, same. I would say people are more excited, but it is more challenging to engage them on the screen, right? So both things together go hand in hand.
Mhm.
Great. Well, I think that probably we've hit our time limit. I think you guys, thank you so much for participating. I hope that was valuable to our audience. And we should probably close out. If anyone had any last thoughts to share, Joyce or anyone, as we wrap up here.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed listening to the practitioners who are acting right now and using this technique and these technologies to really engage our employees. This is the really, it states the obvious, really unique time, and we do have to think creatively, just like you said, Theresa, that this is a really remarkable time for all of us to really think about learning in a very, very different way.
Well said.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for having us today.
Great.
All right, well, I'll pop back in. Thank you, Ed. Thank you guys so much. I'm Shirlene. I'll be wrapping everything up on behalf of Opal Group and wrapping up today's session. I did write some notes, and obviously there was a lot that you guys had covered, but I just love that you had shared examples of what you're actually doing to create the connection, to create the community. And I would think that right now, obviously we're still at the tail end of the pandemic, that having those values and feeling connected to a purpose and to a company are so important right now. It's always important, but right now, we're hearing a lot from the attendees that it's still very important to have that purpose and to feel that drive, and that's very needed right now. So I'm happy that we ended with this panel because we got lots and lots of examples and bites here from all of you guys, and it's very, very appreciative. We appreciate that a lot, and I'm sure the audience does as well. So I want to say thank you, and I'll have to wave goodbye and finish up with some closing remarks for everyone at home watching us. Thank you guys so much.
Bye. Thank you.
you.
Thank you.